Welcome to Mr. Holloway's Foundational Java Skills Series. In this video, we're going to talk about for loops. But before we get started, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. All right, for loops. If you saw my previous video, I talked about while loops, and a for loop is very similar. It's in the family of iterations, and an iteration is simply kind of like a cycle. So you can imagine a circle, and that starts at 0 degrees, and you kind of go around to 360 degrees, and you just keep going and going and going until there's a condition that allows you to stop. And in my previous example, I talked about a kid who was naughty in class, would not stop talking, and so the teacher assigned that student standards, and so they had to write this on the board. And so I actually showed the kid how to write this 1,000 times in less time than it would take to write this. And in that video, they used a while loop. And so this video, we're going to talk about for loops. So let me paste in the while loop that we did in the previous video, and I'm going to make this 50. So I'm not going to go over a while loop specifically, but if you need to know what a while loop is, you can go back to the video. I'll put the video in the link. So I'm just going to go ahead and run this and get rid of that. So you're going to see the while loop here, and so in this case we've set a variable. Initially we set it to zero. It's an integer, and with a while loop, as long as this condition is true, we're going to do something in here. And the other part is the iterator. Now the iterator, if we left out the iterator, this would continue forever into what we would call an infinite loop. If you look at the results here, we start at 0, so x is 0, and it goes all the way to 50. And the reason why it goes to 50 is because of the iterator. So x++ simply means we're just adding 1 with each go round. So it kind of goes around, it comes back up, and it's consistently checking this this value. And as long as this is true, it's going to keep going. The moment it's false, it's going to stop. All right, so what I want to do is, we're going to talk about a for loop, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to convert this same code into a for loop. All right, so let's do it. I'm going to move this down here, and I will put this in a multi-line comment so that we can still have it there, but it won't execute. Okay. All right, so we have that commented out. So let me just go ahead and do a for loop. So the for loop structure looks like this. So I have my opening and closing brackets, and in here I have my do something. So in this case, this is where we put everything. So we don't have to put anything outside of the actual for loop, kind of like what we did here. So there's 3 parts to this part of the for loop. So the first thing we need to do is we need to set a variable. And so in Java, we need to declare its variable type. So I'm going to say x, and I'm going to set this to 0. Very similar to what we did here in the while loop. Okay. Now let's do the second part. The second part, we need to separate by a semicolon, and I'm going to put the condition here. So the condition is as long as x is less than or equal to, and we'll just do 50. Actually, we'll do 10 in this case, and let me get rid of that. All right, now, so this is the condition that we set, and we're done with that. And so now this is where we put the iterator. So we do x++. And so what this does, simply it just adds x. So it does everything in this little package here that we did down here. So if you notice in the while loop, we have the initial variable outside of the while loop. Here we have the condition, and then we have the iterator here. Okay, so we're simply just going to, let me just go ahead and copy this, and I'm going to paste this in, and we'll just run this, and we'll get the exact same results. And there you go. So we start at 0, we go all the way to 9. So that is basically what a for loop does. And if you notice the differences between the two, let me bring this back up. Let me get rid of this, get rid of that, and then what I'll do is, let me just put a statement in here just separating. I'm going to run both of these at the same time. And I'm just going to put a little separator here so we know what we're looking at. And let me put a... Okay, so again, we're running the for loop down here, and the while loop, I should say. So this is the while loop, and this is the for loop. So let's run them. And here we go. Let me change this to 10, so we get them to be equal. So they'll run basically the same code in a different format. And here we go. So this is the result of the for loop, and this is the result of the while loop. Just a couple things here. I actually put less than 10, so this actually works because 9 is less than 10. So if we wanted to actually go to 10, we can do less than or equal to, or we could do, say, less than 11. Either way, it's going to work out fine. And there you have it. All right, so there's two other things I want to talk about, and those one of them is, actually, we're going to go ahead and copy this, and I want to show you in a program called Python Tutor how the code actually executes. So I'm going to open up Python Tutor, and I'm just going to paste in this code. Now, if you're thinking, okay, why are you using Python Tutor? Well, Python Tutor is actually good for Python, Java, C, C++, and JavaScript. So let me come here. I'm going to edit, get rid of all of this code, and I'm going to paste in our code from here, and I'm just going to get rid of this for now, and we don't need this. All right, so I'm just going to leave the for loop in there, and what we're going to do is we're going to see how this for loop executes from a code perspective. We're going to visualize how this for loop works. Okay, so I'm going to click on visualize execution, and it's going to go through a series of steps. Let me see. I am missing something. Let me try public class. See if that works. Okay, look like that is going to work. All right, so what this does is it's a really useful tool. What it does is it goes through all the steps of the code. And so if you notice here, it says step 1 of 35 steps. So this code is going to execute in 35 steps. But if you notice, it only has 11 lines of code, and really the meat of the code is lines 6 through 9, which is the for loop. So how does that happen? Well, let's watch. I'm going to go to step 1. And if you notice, it evaluates here. So this is the next line to execute. It has established that x is equal to 0. And then it's going to print this out. Now watch what happens. It executed this line. If you look at the output, it says I will not talk in class, which it was supposed to do, and it prints the value of x, which is 0. All right, now it goes through and it evaluates this part. So we've set x to 0. The condition is x less than or equal to 10, and this is the iterator. So notice that this is going to go to 1. Okay, so notice that now we've added 1, and so it's going to come down here, and then it will execute, and it says I will not talk in class, and this is 1 because x is equal to 1. So you're going to start to notice a pattern here. It's going to add 2 because of the iterator, so x is equal to 2, and it's going to just execute here. So that's where we get all the steps from. And if you notice, it's just going to keep going. Now I'm going to speed up. I'm just going to click through and just watch that arrow. Right, that is how a for loop works. If you just look at the arrow, it just keeps executing, and then at some point this part is going to be false. All right, so now we're at the point where we're at step 33. We're at the point where x is 10, and let me bring this down. All right, so we need to print this out. Okay, so x is 10, but now notice it comes back up and it's going to iterate. And so now x is 11, and it knows not to proceed because 11 is not less than or equal to 10. It's actually greater than. So it knows that it needs to stop here. So that is the power of Python Tutor. So it's a really useful tool, and I would encourage you to use it if you want to study how your for loops work, because they can get quite complicated in some scenarios. But this is pretty basic It's a basic loop, so this is pretty cool. All right, let's come back here. All right, the last thing I want to cover is simply when do you use a while loop versus a for loop. Generally speaking, you can pretty much use them interchangeably, but the general rule is you use the while loop when you don't know the condition, or you're going to execute it as long as something is true. So you don't know ahead of time what scenario you're going to be executing. So that's the general rule. And here you would know ahead of time, and so that would kind of take experience. As you're just starting out, it's really just important to know the structure of the code, and then once you start coding, you will start to understand, hey, a for loop is more appropriate here versus a while loop. But the general point here is that for loops are very useful in doing things where we have repetitive things that are repetitive. And coming back to this video here, or this slide here, we have a kid that was talking in class, and he needed to write, "I will not talk in class." And so I see a lot of repetition here. So whenever you see repetition in code, it's a great time to use either a for loop or a while loop. And so that concludes the video. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them in the comments section. Please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel, and I will see you in the next video.